exploring small moments of lasting impact. It's the Atomic Jolt Podcast with your host, Martin Cartledge.
Today on the show, I have a good friend of mine, Hayden Trobee, or as I call him, Trobes. I don't really call him that. I've called him a lot of things. We've been friends for a long time. Colorado Springs boy, but I don't want to steal too much of his thunder. How about you introduce yourself? Give a little bit of an elevator pitch, as it were. Tell the people what's up with Hayden.
Dude, yes, my name is Hayden. I live in Colorado Springs with my wife and daughter. I was a touring musician until COVID, and now I work in coffee until touring comes back, and live the state. Like sometimes I'm doing the stay-at-home dad thing, and then when I'm just not at work right now, so it's kind of a waiting game at the moment.
Yeah, and you told me you were like trying to get into like producing and like stuff like that. Like take that a little more seriously.
Yep, I would love to quit doing coffee. So right now, I'm working a little bit in editing and mixing podcast episodes, and so that's like kind of what I'm trying to work into to get out of coffee. But yeah, and then other than that, I'm just writing songs and producing tracks as much as I can just on my own time until, whatever happens. I'm kind of trying to work with different people and kind of try to do a bunch of different things and figure out what I like doing. So yeah, so it's a transitional time in Hayden's life right now. But
yeah, cool, man. So I mean, you like creating stuff. Before I started recording this, we were talking about how in your room you have like a bunch of stuff just hanging on your walls that are super cool. And as long as I've known you, you've been really good at just like building cool shit and making it look pretty effortless. And that's I think that's what we're going to talk about today. You want to talk about some skateboard art,
baby? Absolutely. Yeah, that was what I was and I want to come back to it someday. Right now I'm super focused on doing audio stuff, but one day I would love to, as like another thing, because it's really, really fun and rewarding and cool, is to do it again, is to come back and do skateboard, art and jewelry. And I've been doing a bunch of metallurgy and knife making as well with skateboard and stuff like that. Yeah, so that is what I felt like would be a good one to get talking about, just because, it's very me to have, a foot in 100 different camps and garbage. And like, that's one of the things that really stuck with me that I really, really liked and enjoyed. But
yeah. So let's zoom out, rewind a little bit. So you're from Nebraska, right?
Mm-hmm.
Your family's like just all musicians, basically.
Yeah.
So going into like, you kind of say you're always kind of into like 100 different things. You obviously like creating stuff because you're a musician. Talked about making art with skateboards, like making knives. Kind of where did this inspiration kind of come from? How far back was it? Was it something that happened kind of spontaneously later on, or was it something that you kind of were just around that you just picked up?
So the inspiration for doing it, for me, came from a skateboarder named Dave Baczynski. He is a Pennsylvanian skateboarder, and I think, we might be from Massachusetts, actually, something like that. He's from the East Coast, and he does a lot of the same stuff that I ended up doing, making cutting boards and rings and like pocket knives and things like that. And what he does is he gives back like almost everything he makes from it to like local organizations building skate parks and doing like outreach for skating and stuff like that. And I thought I could, not do that and just kind of try to make a living for myself so that I could come back from tour and just do something at home. And so I could be around my daughter and like not have to go to like a dumb coffee shop job, And so I kind of saw that idea. There's a couple other guys on Instagram that I started following and kind of talking to and a little bit corresponding with and trying to like get going. And I ended up, I was just gonna kind of do it for fun, and I ended up getting what turned out to be a beautiful relationship with a local skate shop called BC in the Springs here. It's defunct now. COVID killed it. but I would just go in there every couple months and they'd give me a pallet of old boards. It turns out when kids come get a new board and they just leave their old one there, they can't put them in a landfill because the adhesives are too like harsh. The landfill won't take them. And like you can't burn them because they'll make you sick. Like the fumes will if you breathe them, because everything's so like the chemicals in them are just really brutal, I guess. And so yeah, they were just like super happy to get rid of them. And so I'd every couple months go in there and get 100 decks. And then so I was like, cool, I better make a run at this. And so I started off just making like rings and earrings for homies and stuff, and then evolved into more stuff, a lot more stuff by the time we got where we are now. But
Yeah, so that's cool. I wrote that down as kind of a note of like I was curious of like where you got your supply, if you were like dumpster diving behind skate parks or going to skate shops. That's really cool. You said you kind of just like started out by like friends, family, things like that, and then you kind of like it just kind of like spread from there. Did you sell things online, or kind of like how big did it kind of get before you shifted to your focus to something else?
So I had an Etsy for a while, and Etsy's obviously a super saturated place to try and sell stuff. So I thought that was going to be my best bet. And what ended up happening was word of mouth was way more prevalent, I guess. And so I would just make something for somebody, and then that person would tell somebody else. And so every commission I got, so it was cool. It ended up being that I had too many commissions to keep my Etsy store going. So I shut it down, which is awesome. It was a great problem to have. But that's what it was, is every message I was getting, like, hey, can you make this for me, was somebody saying, hey, I saw this that you made for so-and-so. And so I just ended up having so many of those. I had this giant whiteboard in the garage with all like the orders on it, and it was like getting full. It was crazy. So yeah, it kind of took on a life of its own, I guess. But I definitely didn't know what I was doing as far as like doing the business thing. There definitely came a point, or if I like when I get into it again, I'm gonna have to figure it out and like do something different, because it ended up that I was just like working on stuff in that world just as much as I was working my actual job. And I like didn't start out like charging enough at all. So I was like losing money on like a bunch of stuff. So I think that was part of the reason that I just stepped away from it for a sec, is because I was just like, dude, I'm spending like, and my supply is almost free. Like I'm spending money on tools and glue and clamps and stuff like that when things break, and saw blades and things. But the wood is free. And I was still losing money because of my time. Because I was putting so much time in it and not charging enough for what was going on. So it was I made a mess of it for sure.
Yeah, well, I mean, like you said, that is a great problem to have.
Yeah.
And it kind of speaks to how like good quality stuff can just kind of spread faster than a lot of other things. What was your first commission? Who was the first commission for?
The first thing I ever made was so I made a couple of little planters. So they were like for succulents. I don't know if I have any of them anymore. I either sold them all or gave a bunch of them away. I've got one of them here somewhere. But there's basically, I would just chop down into a little square a bunch of layers of skateboard, and then I would just glue them up with this big press thing that I made. And so that it was just like clamped with hundreds of pounds of pressure. And then basically just let that sit until it's super, super, super dry and cured and stuff. And then all I would do is just basically, at the time I had this big belt sander, and I would just shove it in until it was like a dodecahedron, but not actually. It was just like a bunch of different, some big multifaceted little blob of, whatever color the board was. And then that all was just from one board. And I kind of worked my way from there. I only made planters for forever, for a really long time. From like a couple months, I guess a really long time, not really, but in the scheme of how long it kind of went for. But I started doing 2 different boards or 3 different boards if I felt like the colors went together, and things like that. But yeah, I kind of, from there it evolved. And like the things I really got commissions on were earrings. I made probably 100 pairs of earrings. So, you know, trying different shapes and stuff like that. It, like most of the time ended up being little like dangly teardrop things, sometimes with like a little hole in them, sometimes not, you know, whatever. And then a lot of them I ended up making like a really most of my money ended up getting made from I call them like offcut earrings, which is basically just stuff that came off the floor from offcuts of other things that I was doing, that like you would look at it on the floor and it would look like, oh, that could be a cool earring, and then you just make two of them, you shape it out and then cut it in half and then finish. And so it was really like, it had the, I feel bummed because it had the potential to be something that could be really cool, you know, not only like business wise, but it could be something that like a bunch of different people could get into, that I could have like reached, you know, a bunch of young, like, I guess they call them makers, like people who just make stuff or do woodworking and stuff like that. It's a really, really cool medium, and a really, like, it's really unique looking and really easy to work with, even though it's really hard wood. But yeah, definitely. Yeah. Another way to say when I finally jump back into it, I like got to do different or better.
Yeah. No, that's really cool though. So I mean, what would you say like was your like big like kind of jumping off point or like platform or network, I guess, to like how it kind of like just spread like wildfire? Like, was it initially like your wife or like one of your friends, or did you kind of, because I know you're in like heavily involved in like kind of the music scene, was it through there, or what was kind of like the initial like circle that helped kind of push this along?
Dude, so initially to get going, it was just like neighbors and family and close friends. But when it actually looked like it could be like a business, was all because of just people I knew from touring. So I was shipping things like crazy. Like I had, you know, all my stamps.com going and all that stuff. And like, yeah, I was really looking at it for a while until touring stopped, really. But yeah, it was the way that things like went from not really anything to, oh, this could be something, is just literally all credited to people I met from traveling and playing music. It was crazy. Really lucky too. I got a bunch of really cool friends who are into cool stuff like that. And yeah, that, I mean, that's the, you know, the majority of messages I was getting was either people that I had, like, that were in bands that we toured with, or family members even, or friends. So it ended up being, it got even one level further, was I felt like I made stuff for everybody I knew in bands. And then I had people's moms or people's like girlfriends or stuff like that getting a hold of me and asking for stuff, it was really cool, man. It was awesome.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, anyone that starts something that they feel that they think is cool, just in general, and then it gets some kind of success, and then it happens organically, it has to feel even better. Outside of like having that good problem of like, oh, I'm like literally too busy, I like can't, I don't know if I can keep up. Like, I don't know, maybe I should like not be as nice and charge more money. Like beyond the business side of it, what kind of, outside of this skateboarder, what was his name again?
Dave Baczynski.
Cool. Is he a pro skater?
Yeah, he's one of the guys. I don't know. I'm actually not even sure if he is anymore. But when I was into him, he was a pro for Dark Star, which like,
oh wow,
made boards for a second, which is crazy. I don't know if they still do or if that's what he's still doing. But yeah,
cool. So you see him, and you know, obviously you're inspired by that, and we can go into more of like your skateboarding, because you're still like a really good skateboarder for. But why do you like making stuff?
Dude, I think it all comes down to, I love learning. I think that's why I so easily pick up and drop stuff. And I think that was why temporarily dropping skate art was so difficult, is just because like making things it's almost an infinite well of things to learn. And so it's just every new thing you try, or every new technique, or every new, you know, type of project you try to get into, or, you know, starting over with whatever, getting into whatever it is. I'm sure you know this about me, I obsess a little bit about stuff. And so I just like when I get into something, I get so into it, and I want to know everything about it, and I just want to learn and take in information. And for whatever reason, that's really, really, really fun for me. And so, especially when I'm first getting going with something, learning, how to do a glue up, learning how to like cut different patterns, or like get it. When I first bought a bandsaw, I like lost my mind because I was like trying all different kinds of new stuff. Yeah, all that stuff. Or even learning how to like waterproof a piece of wood so you can put a plant in it. Like stuff that, to me, saying that sounds so boring, but for whatever, I loved trying stuff out, and even screwing stuff up and ruining pieces, and having trouble, or like cutting myself on blades or sandpaper, stuff like that. Even that, I kind of reveled in it, and it was really fun for me. But yeah, I think that's where it all comes from. I like making stuff because learning is so much fun for me. Like that's what all this stuff kind of ended up being as well, was learning how to diffuse sound, or learning how to record, or learning how to mix, all that stuff. So it's just all learning, I think.
Yeah. So particularly for the skateboard art stuff, let's say, take me back to this first project where it's like you have this first person that's like, hey, this looks cool. Like, I want to pay you for this. Or maybe were doing it for free just at first, just to be like, I just want to do this. This is fun. It was more of like a self-serving thing. Like, it's fun, just take it. Like, what was that moment there, where you were like, okay, this is actually pretty cool, and I think more people will like it. I mean, was there like a moment where you were like, I can do this? Like, it goes from like, you see inspiration, you kind of are like, I have a hold on this. You had to have some kind of belief in yourself. I mean, you probably didn't go in like, oh, I'm just going to wing it. You're confident, but that only takes you so far until it becomes like a practical sense of like, you have to take that first step. Like, what was that moment for you in like this skateboard art kind of business?
So oh man, I think that for me, a lot of times it's, I don't know that I was going to say, I don't know that I really ever get there. And I always feel like I'm kind of faking it a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like everyone's kind of like that, even people who do stuff like that. With making stuff, I think, I mean, yeah. And I guess what we were saying before about realizing that I was not charging enough money. Maybe that probably is a side effect of not feeling like I'm doing a good enough job, or whatever. There did come a time when I started making knives. There was a time where I felt like this is not good enough. And then there is a distinct time where I realized I was trying different things, and I realized that I was to a place where no matter what happened, I felt like I could figure it out, or whatever problem arose, I could fix. And I did kind of come to a moment where I was like, oh dude, I can, like, this is very doable. And I say that because there was definitely a moment where it didn't feel that way. And so, yeah, there was a moment where I had two different shapes of knife blade that I was doing for people. And I was like, hey, I do this one or I do this one, is kind of what I was up to. And like, I ended up doing the like the heat treat, not wrong, but I ended up quenching in a weird way, in a weird time. And I ended up being able to fix it and do everything again from scratch with the same thing. And I told my wife, I was like, this is so cool. Like, I know how to, like, I have all the tools that I need. That's like the worst, is when that you could get something done if you just had the right tool, for the right tool for the job or whatever. Super, there's your problem. Yeah. But there did come a time where if dude, that's actually, honestly, that's a great thought too, is that it's not necessarily like you're proficient when you can do everything right every single time. It's more about how you can, fix what you mess up, or, be able to minimize those kinds of things, and like accepting that those things are going to happen, and that how to get out of it. So
yeah. No, I mean, and like building, like making knives, like, are you kidding me? Like, that sounds so hard to me. And just the fact that you like hit a spot where you're like, you know what? I think I messed this one up, but okay, I'm gonna do this and make a knife. And there you go. It looks good now. Like, cool. Cross that hurdle. Insane. That's so cool. I actually remember seeing your posts about that. Like this was like a few years ago, right?
Yeah.
A while ago.
Yeah.
I remember seeing that and being like, I'm so far removed from it. I don't even think I'm cool enough to like carry a knife. Like I think it's cool. It when I see people carry knives and I can tell like it's like a genuine like they use it, they're not just carrying it just I don't know, just let's show off. Like I'm always like, dude, I wish I did cool enough things every day or even like every once in a while to warrant carrying a knife. And that's honestly why I wasn't a good friend. I just couldn't. Yeah, I was like,
Dude,
I want to support Hayden, but I wouldn't use it.
dude, the one I made for myself is in our like in my like camp pack, and I still we haven't been out yet since Billy was born, so
Mhm.
so I haven't used the one I made for myself yet, so it's all good.
Man, who knows? Maybe I should just
Dude, when
start
I
carrying a knife.
come
Just go
back,
for it.
it shouldn't be long now because I'll have to refurbish the old shop, but
Mhm.
yeah, I'll hit you up, dude.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned Billy, so I was gonna. It's a good segue. I was gonna kind of like talk about how more of the the inner drive and the lessons that you kind of learn along the way of this kind of process and kind of how you are and like as a person. You mentioned you just like learning stuff. You like experimentation. You like overcoming stuff, learning new things, iterating. It sounds like just figuring things out and just creating new stuff and just kind of in a way the way I hear that is you just like proving to yourself you can do stuff and you also just like trying out new things and you don't want things to become stale. What parts of that would you pull out and maybe pass down to like your kids or your friends? What could you pull from there? I mean, just like that whole kind of, I guess, like the whole like ethos of learning stuff, or is that something that you kind of try to instill now, or what do you do with that?
Dude, that's that's a great question. Dang. So you mean like what kind of little nugget would I give someone?
Say you like create like skateboard art, you make knives, you make all these like kind of cool creative like little niche things you just get into and then you just roll with. What could you pull out of it into like kind of like a life lesson or like kind of like a takeaway you could just share with someone? It could be your family, it could be a friend, it could be a relative.
Yeah, dude, I think so. In my life, it's always been very difficult for me to stay in now. I like I have the propensity to be a very anxious human being, and I'm oftentimes my head's not where I'm at, and I'm kind of thinking about what's coming or what's happened before, or worrying and things like that. And I think that is such a useful learning is such a useful tool and a useful uh, thing to keep you in right now. Like when I'm have an angle grinder to a piece of carbon steel and like there's sparks flying everywhere, I'm not thinking about anything else. And like I, other than yeah, am I going to get sparks in my nose or my eyes or something like that? And so it's a really great way to kind of start just living in the moment. I guess that sounds kind of cliche, but it's something that's really hard for me. And that's anyone who has trouble doing that, I would just say learn something that you think is cool, or like go learn a new, sport or a skill or a trade or a craft or something like that is what I would do. And so yeah, I think that's what, like, dude, I'm like constantly learning and I'm constantly getting into new things. And yeah, it's to a fault a little bit where I kind of pick up and drop things a little too quick, I think. And so yeah, I mean, there you go. You can end up on the other side of it and be like, whoops, this isn't this isn't good. But that's, I guess, as far as something that I would tell my daughter or a homie or something like that, is I would just be like, it is such a good way to learn to be where you're at and to keep your head in the moment and to enjoy the moment that you're in, instead of worrying about what's coming next, or freaking out about anything like that. It's just, it forces you to be immersed in something that's not, being anxious.
That would be like a great life skill. Totally something that I think everyone could learn from and get better at. Definitely no end game there. So kind of on the inverse of that, let's say you're in the moment and you talk about like just trying to like stay focused, just see something through, not jump ship and just, just kind of stay on track with something. You mentioned earlier about kind of, screwing up things and like kind of failures of like throwing away a project or kind of like hitting the point where it's like, I think I have to start over, and kind of dealing with that like frustration and like failure. And like it's a good also analogy of life because it won't all be as simple, not to like water anything down, but it won't be as simple as, I messed up like a skateboard project. It'll be like, oh, I messed up at my job, or I messed up at, something, whatever it is. I mean, what would you take out of that? Might be a harder question. Again, same question. What would you take of like the harder lesson of kind of picking up the pieces, no pun intended, and moving on from it?
Dude, I think I'm pumped that you asked, because I actually was thinking about this not that long ago. I think that parenting has actually, obviously, all of your experiences in life point to how you're going to parent. But parenting, to me, the lesson has been forgiving yourself. And it is, dude, it's so hard to do. Everyone I know sucks at it, and I suck at it. And as a parent, you literally like have to get good at forgiving yourself, because you do something, or you tell your kid something, or you let them do whatever, and then you go, oh, like that isn't right, or I don't want that to be that way, or I messed this up. And parenting really has helped me as far as learning to just kind of reset when things like that happen. And it's super interesting. You would think like, I would think that it would be a lot easier to say, oh, well, from doing all this stuff, or from playing music, or from making, making knives or making jewelry, all that stuff, that taught me to do this or whatever. And I really feel like it's been the opposite. Like parenting this kid has definitely been super, super big in teaching me in all those other areas of life, and especially making stuff, because making stuff is like, your feedback is instant. Whether it looks right or it doesn't look right. It either does or it doesn't. And when you're a parent, it's a lot more abstract. And so it definitely makes it easier to look at something like when you're doing, it's kind of a trade, I guess, when you're making stuff, or when you're, running a shop, it makes those lessons way, way easier. But yeah, so I guess that's what I would condense it into, is that being a parent has helped me forgive myself, which helps me when I screw something up really bad, be able to just, far more easier than before I was a parent, just drop it and say, cool, I'm good with starting over, and it's okay. And I'm not going to lose sleep over it.
I really like what you said about that. When you make stuff, the feedback is almost instant. Sometimes it's quite literally instant. Other times it's like a little delayed, but I could see how parenting is, way more abstract. And I think that would be way more scary. So talking about parenting, let's like kind of like rewind again to like, your upbringing and your parents. I'm sure you were inspired, or you kind of picked up on some of the stuff that they instilled to you, and your brother. I mean, do you think they have like that same kind of attitude? Now being a parent too, can you look at that and be like, yeah, I think my parents kind of had that same outlook, or yeah, what was that like?
Dude, speaking of parents, speaking of there's your problem, that's the first thing you ever said to my dad. You remember that?
Oh, I always forget that is literally the first words. Gary is a saint, and he probably looked at me like, who is this punk my son is moving in with?
Yeah, we have my garbage first car that ran sometimes, and you had just gotten off work, and you're like boots and like CCCB outfit, and you're just like, there's your problem. And we were both like, oh, way.
Yeah, exactly. Like you guys are like actually being real men and trying to fix a problem. And it's funny that you said CCCB outfit, because that's what it was for me. It was not genuine. I still to this day am not handy. I can't build things. It was an outfit for me. But yeah, that was what a great impression.
Dude, that's awesome. Oh man. Anyhow, to answer your question, yes, dude, being a parent totally makes you see it makes you think about how you were raised a ton. I think about it all the time, and it brings back memories that I had forgotten about. Yeah, and early memories too. It's super weird. And yeah, my mom is that's where my brother and I get it for sure. Like my dad is like that too. My dad's super handy, and he's got that mechanically minded thing going on, and he's analytical. But my mom is like my dad's creative too, but my mom is like, it's unreal. She just kind of exudes like creativity and my mom's always on a project. And so that's where Drake and I get it. Like for those from, and anyone probably listening, my brother is a tattooer. And same thing. He like literally tried to get into apprenticing, and the first, dozen people he talked to said, I don't think you're going to make it in this business. And, now here he is. And like, that's my whole family, dude. And my mom is really like that as well. Super motivated by like the prospect of being told you can't. And yeah, so like my parents definitely, like my brother and I are both really, really like equal amalgamations of our parents. Like my dad can, build a house, and my mom can be a painter one day and an interior designer the next. And so, and like Drake and I both inherited awesome parts of those things. And like, well, obviously it's not like without getting weird and sound like a goon, but like that's some stuff I'm super grateful to my parents for, is that, my mom is always making something. And so I get to, talk to my mom now about, parenting my kiddo, and then also like, hey, what would you, what kind of tool would you use for blah, 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 or whatever. And it's so sick, dude. Like being an adult and being a parent in those parts of your life is so sick. I love it, man.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and like having known your parents, it's like, yep. Like I can totally see like you and your brother, like where like you both get it from. And like I keep going back to it, but like you and your brother are just like so freaking creative and handy. But it's cool to hear about like kind of in between the ear kind of thoughts and like things you take away from it, because on the outside, I think it's easy for people to look at, your Etsy shop or like your band or your other projects and to be like, oh yeah, like it was probably just like, they just picked up something and they just were able to do it. They're naturally creative, like that kind of excuse. But like, at least like everything I've seen, it's like you work really hard at it, and it doesn't just happen overnight. Like the overnight success thing is a total farce. So it's a lot of it comes back to, that internal drive and of course like how you were raised and stuff. It's really underrated sometimes. That's cool.
Even overnight successes, there's a lot that people don't see that goes on behind the scenes that really, gets that. So absolutely. And some people are super lucky, but yes, I totally get what you're saying. And that's very kind of you.
Yeah. Yeah, of course. So being a parent, kind of passing down some of the things you learned along the way from your parents and just living everyday life. Do you think, I mean, how old is your daughter?
She's 2.5. She'll be 2.5 in December, pretty much. So
time flies. That's crazy. So, let's say that, like, how do you approach the things you love? I mean, like building, like making music, building skateboard art, making knives. I mean, how much of that do you share with her? I mean, she's so young, but I'm sure she sees stuff. I mean, how do you kind of approach that? How do you kind of pass that down without being forceful, or if you are forceful? I'm curious to hear about that too.
Yeah, it is really hard not to, dude. I'm sure you and I also, when we lived together, had all kinds of conversations like, dude, I'm gonna force this band to my kids or whatever, or this movie or whatever.
Totally.
Yeah, it's really, dude, it's hard not to be heavy-handed about it, just because obviously you and I are very similar in this way, where when we're into something, it's all like very all the way. And like we're not really halfway into anything. Our whole friend group is like that. But yeah, so it's like, I don't want to, I hate that dad who's like, hey, you have to like the Broncos or, whatever.
Sure.
And I don't want to be like that, especially with things that I really, really love. Cause I don't want her to be like, oh yeah, my dad drove that into me or whatever. So yeah, it definitely, that's something that I don't know if she's just a little bit young right now or what, but it maybe remains to be seen. Because sometimes she shows a real interest in something that I'm doing, or like if I'm in here doing something, or dude, even back like when I was in the garage, making, because a lot of the times when she was old enough, when I was really making knives and stuff, she was really into seeing like, so what you do is you heat your steel to, oh, I forget what it even is now. I think it's like 15 to 1700 degrees. And you use like a little laser guy or whatever to see what the temperature is, and you get it all super bright red hot. And then I dip it in motor oil. A lot of people have like a special oil they use, but there's badass OGs who just like, dip it in motor oil. And I was like, hell yeah. So I cut the top off of a tall boy and used motor oil in there. And that was my shit, dude. And
that does sound super cool.
It was awesome. But yeah, she like loved how it like sizzled and all, it was crazy. And she wasn't talking super much at that point. But yeah, that kind of stuff, that just like puts a joy in your heart, man. It's awesome. But yeah, so I'll be interested to see about that kind of stuff, or like, or if she's interested in coming to shows, or if she wants to be a part of that whole thing. But yeah, I know I'm definitely gonna ruin some stuff for her. I'm sure of it. Like, dude, as long as it's not like, as long as she likes The Shining, as long as she can sit through a hockey game with me, as long as she can, kind of do, even begrudgingly, if she can do some of that stuff with me, I'll be pumped. And anything beyond that, I'll be over the moon about.
Yeah. Yeah. That seems like a good outlook. I'm gonna struggle. You get it. Me and Kristen are like already like, I'm like, dude, she will never wear like Rantanen or a McKinnon jersey ever. Like it's Stamkos or Kucherov or bust. Like
bust, dude.
That's it. Like she won't even wear Corey Perry. Like I don't care if he's on the Avalanche or the Lightning right now. I hate him. I'm just strong-willed, but that's cool. It seems like it's a very like level-headed kind of good thing. Cause yeah, you don't want to turn, very impressionable things you love off to things just from like forcing it. And I think it could, in a very like roundabout way, you could circle back to the hobbies and like the things you love doing. It sounds like your parents weren't like, oh, you need to start building stuff with your hands, or oh, you need to love music and you need to be a musician. They just kind of instilled like the core foundational kind of maybe takeaways, or like the life lessons, or things you probably should get good at, or things they'll teach you, and then it kind of just evolves from there.
Dude, I actually hadn't thought of that, and that is probably the case, because on those big things that they didn't really hammer into me or anything, I came back to that's a very defining thing for my mom, is being creative, and it's a very defining thing for my dad is being able to help, to be able to fix things or to help situations and things like that. And those things weren't driven into me or forced on me at all. And I think those things are the most important things. Those are big ideas, those are big life things. And I came around to those things on my own. And that, dude, yeah, I didn't even think of that. And that's a great thing to kind of keep in your hip pocket, is like, I want to, I'll obviously be like, hey, here's what I love. And I want you to see this whole world of, whatever genre of thing, or what, I'm definitely going to throw things like that her way. But as far as, being creative, or, being a helpful human being, or a contributing human being, or whatever, I think those are, maybe it just has to do with, what big picture things are and what regular day-to-day things are. It's a Jim and Michael thing.
Totally. Is she, I'm like thinking about how little kids, like they love like fancy, like crazy, like castle beds and like kind of like the like little kid stuff. Are you like gonna like, is that something you've like thought about? I'm sure you have, of like, oh, I'll build my daughter something like this, or like a tree, like all like the idealistic stuff, a tree house, like a princess castle, things like that. I mean, are you into that kind of stuff? Is she into that kind of stuff?
It's hard to say. One day she wants to watch Frozen 100 times, and the next day she wants to swing golf clubs all day. So like, so right now I think maybe she just has a tiny little attention span at the moment, but dude, I love the idea of building stuff like that. I think that if she ever asked, I would be so excited. I'd be like, I would, and dude, I would dive all the way into it. It's like very me. I would just be like, okay, here's, I found, these guys that built this and they did this the other way, and I'm going to do it this way. And I'm going to make one of these, or, we're going to have a secret tunnel or whatever garbage. But yeah, dude, if she asked for stuff like that, I would love to do that kind of thing. Cause that's very, like you said, idyllic, is to, be the dad that's like, oh yeah, like, I'll pay you the rent, make something, or, anything you want, little girl, I'll, rope down the moon for you. Well, that's
right. No. And I mean, I was thinking like, I'm not just saying it's just a girl thing. It, like any little kid or like thinks of like, oh, I want this thing. Their imagination is huge. And like you said, I mean, almost in like a way they have like probably a shorter attention span, but that's really cool. And I imagine that teaches like adults like to slow down and to enjoy things more and all that other stuff. I'm sure there's a cajillion things that it teaches people. But yeah, and more of like a Hayden Trobee skill thing. I'm like, yeah, I'm pretty envious because if like, I have a kid and they're like, hey, yeah, dad, can you like make me something really rudimentary? I'm going to be like, one, if like my kid ever says the word rudimentary, I'm like, whoa, you got that from your mom. But the other time I'm like, oh, like I got Hayden on speed dial. So that's a cool skill set. Hopefully you get to use it.
Any old thing you ever need, man. I'll see if I'll Google it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, cool. Well, I'm going to like shift over into more of like a rapid fire. I have a couple of like kind of speed round questions.
Yeah.
And some of them are kind of random and I was just kind of preparing, and I've known you for a long time. So some of them are like out of left field a little bit, but I guess that's the fun of it.
Oh, yeah.
I know you're a big pickle guy.
Yeah.
What's like the best pickle you've ever had?
Dude, the best pickle I ever had is my great grandma's homemade. Unreal.
Nice.
My dad used to eat them all the time, and he used to tell stories about how so I actually never had any that she made, but I had some that were her recipe. And so there would be just wall of shelves of pickle jars that she would make, and my dad would go down there, and there would be like a pile of forks down there, because he would just go eat a jar and leave the fork, and go eat a jar and leave the fork. But yeah, dude, that's something I'd love to do someday, to start making pickles and have a similar thing go on. But my kid can go down there and do the same thing. But yeah, best pickle I ever had was that. Commercial is, dude, that brand Clausen. They never freeze them or let them get warm. They're in refrigerated trucks, and they fucking rip, dude. They're so
All right, folks, you heard it. This guy is a bona fide pickle connoisseur. So take notes. You can't get any of the Trobee family stuff, but there you go, Clausen.
You can get that anywhere. It's good stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so like you've made a lot of different stuff. This could be music too. I mean, we didn't get too much into your music projects, but I mean, what was the like, I guess like from a product or a project or whatever, what was like your favorite or the most, I don't know, the one that made you feel like most relieved and proud of? And that's not to say the other ones are any lesser, but I guess like the one that sticks out.
Dude, yeah, exactly. It is all kind of like by a nose, but the most rewarding thing I've ever worked on was, and it's the most obvious one, but the most rewarding thing I've ever worked on is the most recent Tiger Wine record. Is we almost every aspect of it, we kind of not figured out ourselves, but like as far like we recorded with our friend Jeremy, who, I mean, he's our friend now, he wasn't at the time. But we learned of him through a friend. And we wrote all the songs, like really together, and we were all in the same room from when most of it was written. Whereas, now Shane lives in Pennsylvania and we all live here, and, a couple of us have, big boy jobs now. And so it's a lot harder to do that. And two of us are parents, all kinds of stuff. But that was the last one where we were all in the room for almost everything that was written. We figured out where we wanted to go record. We, got, we set up our lives to make it work. And I was really, really proud with the outcome. Whereas the other ones were awesome. It was just, a lot of things were figured out for us, and we weren't as hands-on. And this one it's just so easy to see all of, our fingerprints on it. And so that's really rewarding and sick. I love it.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. We'll get to that in the plug section, but yeah, Tiger Wine, great band. I can't wait for your answer on this one. So desert island scenario, you can only pick one, and this is music. So it's good that you mentioned, Tiger Wine. So artists, like desert island artists, you can only listen to one of these two forever. It's David Bazan or The Color Revolt.
Oh, dude. Oh man, that me so good, dude.
Yeah.
I think just as far as, oh my gosh, but that's the thing though. I was gonna say just as far as, like, his Color Revolt is much more multifaceted than Bazan is, but dude, Bazan is that stuff that you think about for just days and days, and you're like, oh man, that's so painful and like and poignant. Oh, that's tough. Okay, I think if I was on a desert island for 2 years, I'd bring Color Revolt. But if I was on a desert island until I died, I'd bring Bazan.
Yeah, I had a feeling.
Because, dude, for a couple of years, if I could only listen to Color Revolt, I'd be like sick. I'm gonna, I'd just get lost in it. But if I had to listen to one thing for the entire rest of my life, I would listen to Bazan only.
Yeah, you'd go gray a lot earlier listening to David Bazan, but it was like probably what he would want,
I would die quicker. It would be awesome.
Yeah, he would like that. He'd be like, that's what I want. Okay, so we didn't even touch on you and the Wild Hogs, you and motorcycles.
Yeah.
So like let's say like your dream motorcycle. I don't know anything about motorcycles, but I know, again, you're handy with them. You've owned a few. Dream motorcycle. Walk me through it.
I would, if I could ever find one, I would love to have an old, super shiny, like kickstart panhead Harley. It would be really, really cool. They just like, and I would also do a bunch to it. Like I would take everything off it. I would do a cool like foot clutch so that the handlebars are all clean. I would rat it out, kind of is what I mean. But yeah, like or super chromed out would be really cool, because that would look really classic. Like you just kind of look like a spaceman rolling down the street. But yeah, like, and I love how old Harleys have the big springs on the forks, and they, white wall tire, or not white wall tires, but like the white lettering around it. And just nothing on there you don't need. A little tiny peanut gas tank that you can't get anywhere with. Be awesome, dude. Be so.
Yeah. No, I'm into it. All right. Hockey question. Well, it's 2 parts. So you live in Colorado, you're an Avalanche fan.
Yeah.
Who's your favorite Avalanche player from the past, not current?
From the past. Okay. Dude. That is a tough one. I mean, okay, besides the obvious, because you'd have to say a Sakic or a Wah or something like that. But dude, I really love looking back at like assist players. Like I was just looking at Deadmarsh the other day, like his stats. Adam Deadmarsh was like a dude, like not one of the famous guys, but he played on the original Nordiques team, and like he was just one of those guys that was in on everything, and like kind of like a big guy, physical player. The older I get, the more I really love defense, and I love that kind of side of the game, which people think isn't as exciting, but I really like it. But my favorite vintage Avs player is probably Peter Forsberg, dude. Like
Forsberg, yeah, dude. 21, we trust. He's great.
Yeah, like Sakic has unreal highlight reels. You could go on YouTube and just be inspired all day. Yeah. Why is hilarious, but dude, like Forsberg is a little of everything, isn't he?
Yeah. And I mean, it's cool that you mentioned I'm gonna attempt to draw like a connection to our episode with this, but you're talking about these assist players, like the guys that don't get the glory. But I mean, a team needs those people. They're the sandpaper people. They're the glue people. They're the ones that like lead by example. They're kind of behind the scenes. They make things work. And it's through those same kind of things that we're talking about. They definitely fail a lot, but they just stick to the process. They have to learn new things. I mean, they're athletes. They can't just like sit on their laurels, whatever. Yeah. So it's cool. I respect that.
Yeah. I was just telling my wife that there's no Ovechkin stats without without
Backstrom.
Without Backstrom or Oshie or any of those guys who, I mean, those guys are superstars as well, but who else is going to let Ovi just sit at the top of the circle and score the most goals of all time?
Right. So who's your favorite present Avalanche player?
My favorite present Avalanche player. Oh man, that's tough. Dude, it'd be easy to say Landeskog because our birthdays are 2 days apart. That would be a fun one.
Oh, nice.
But I don't know if he is my favorite Av at the moment. Man, there's so many good ones, huh? Dude, I'm gonna go off the beaten path a little bit and say JT Compher is who I'm gonna say. That guy he's one of those where he just is a workhorse. Like he gets that like highlight reel play sometimes, but a lot of times he's just like working like nobody's business. He's just all over the place. He's on the power play. He's on the penalty kill. The guy rips. Yeah.
Yeah.
Whenever
Timothy.
Yeah. Whenever I see him score, I get a little special feeling because he's just one of those guys that like, he's going to have a really long career, I think. And yeah. I don't know if he's ever going to be a Hall of Famer or anything like that, but he's always going to be a dude who like is fun to watch and does all the right things. I think that's awesome. I think that's really cool.
Yeah. Another silent professional, another sandpaper guy for sure. Or glue guy. Yeah, I guess he has some sandpaper. Not really.
He gets in.
Okay. So plugs, let's go, man. Like tell us what we should check out.
Dude, my big thing that is always going to be a thing is my band is called Tiger Wine. We just put out a record on Tooth and Nail Records just in time for COVID last year. So had a bunch of touring get canceled, but we're going to be back. You can find us at Tooth and Nail Records website, or we're on, our band is all one word, the feline in the beverage. On Spotify or Apple Music or whatever. Also on every streaming service, my little songwriting project is called Hovel. It's like shovel without the S is my little thing that I do just to be able to create and write songs and work with other people and, work up my producing portfolio and things like that. What else do we got going on? I don't know. That's probably what I'm doing really. Other than that, if you have a podcast that you think sounds bad and you want it to sound better, send it my way, man. That's what I do now. I do editing and mixing for podcast episodes. So yeah, try me out. I'm cheap at the moment.
I'm into it. Dude, thanks so much for doing this.
Thanks for
Big thanks to Hayden Trobee for joining the podcast. It's always a good time chatting with that dude. If you enjoyed the show and you're interested in supporting the show a little bit more, you can leave us a review on the podcast platform of your choice. If the podcast platform of your choice doesn't have reviews, you can follow us. That's probably the best way to support. If you're on social media and you're interested in following us on that, you can find us on Twitter and Instagram at Atomic Jolt Pod. That's Atomic Jolt Pod. Thank you so much again for listening, and we'll see you next time.